Guys, just before we get started, if you're loving the podcast, can you please go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and please make sure that you subscribe on whatever channel that you listen to us on. It helps us out dramatically.
Try not to fail. So I hate this whole fail fast thing. I think try to win, try to do something you're going to be good at, because I think I do like that whole idea of success breeds success. And I think early wins kind of build on themselves and it builds its own momentum. So I would say don't believe in the fail stuff. Make sure you succeed early.
Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I think when I went through your profile on LinkedIn and read a lot of articles and kind of looked into your history, and one of the things that really stood out to me was on your profile, consumer psychologist. And I think it probably talks to a little bit about how you think about marketing and business, and probably where a lot of your research has gone into as well. And I'm excited to kind of dive into a lot of that today, which is to just kind of get an understanding of how your brain works and kind of how you think about it. But I'd love to start with a little bit about yourself and I guess how you got to this point in your career and a little bit about your history.
Yeah, sure. When I was at school, I used to trade shares every lunchtime on the only landline in the school. So at lunchtime would start, I'd go to my stockbroker, I'd trade shares all lunchtime, then I'd go back to class. This is back in the day when stockbrokers existed and all that kind of stuff. And so I was always had a love of money, but I was failing school, and I went to see a tutor, and the tutor said, "What are your interests?" And I said, "Money and people." And he goes, "Oh, you should become a consumer psychologist." And I thought, shit, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. I don't even know what it is, but it just sounds exactly right. And so I studied psychology, studied commerce at uni, did my thesis in identifying the underlying constructs of cool people, so what makes people cool, became a cool hunter for a while, then became a forensic psychologist for a while in the prison system, but always knew that I wanted to do consumer psychology. And so I got a job in a marketing agency, and it went from there. So I am actually I'm a registered psychologist. There is no real term for consumer psychologist in Australia. It's a sub-profession in America and the UK. But once you're a psychologist, you can call yourself a cat psychologist, a dog psychologist, and call yourself any type of psychologist.
I want to pull on the string of the first area, people being cool. I find that interesting, and I think it obviously has its relevance in today's society with, say, social media, and I guess that's probably been something that, from your perspective, transitioning into marketing, you've kind of that would have definitely carried across a lot. I would have imagined. But can you dive into that a little bit and what was that like as a job, first of all, and then second of all, what was kind of some of the things that some of the key principles that you were using to kind of understand that?
Well, the whole concept of cool has kind of been around for a long time. And there haven't been that many attempts at identifying it in a scholastic kind of way. And so what we had to look at all the research, and a lot of research kind of got confused between things that are cool and people that are cool. And so the first thing we kind of thought was nothing is cool unless cool people are using it. So if cool people stop going across the foyer of a hotel, then that hotel stops being cool. So we thought, right, let's just focus on people and what makes people cool. And there's a little bit of kind of academic research beforehand just talking about cool being a mask of detached emotional irony. So cool people have the ability to suppress their emotions and present with a kind of almost like a dead-end affect. And so they're cool, like they're...
Matt McConaughey.
Yeah, they're not overly demonstrative and overly emotional. So it's actually quite a masculine... It skews more masculine, and when you ask people to nominate cool people, they'll normally just instinctively say males versus females. And I know it's going to irritate a lot of people who are listening right now. But then we just kind of we then did a thing called principal component analysis and looked at the variables that differentiated cool people from uncool people. And the 5 factors are self-belief and confidence, defying convention, understated achievement, caring for others, and connectivity. And I guarantee you and all of your listeners, as I say that, are just ticking it off in their head right now, going, how cool am I? So the other thing we did is we turned it into a little cool test. So there's 25 questions, 5 in each factor that you can self-assess how cool you are and then work out what you need to do to be cooler.
Yeah, wow. So the level of research into that's really interesting because like I think about it and I think like I don't consider myself a cool person.
No, you're not.
Nah, I don't consider myself that, right?
No,
So
you're definitely not.
yeah, so it's
Not even close. Right?
yeah. So
No, really uncool. Sorry, I don't mean to offend you.
no, not at all, not at all.
Lovely and nice, but definitely not cool.
No, I don't consider myself that. But I think about people like Matt McConaughey, and he's the epitome of it in my opinion. And he's someone who I go, yeah, wow, he's just got it. And then you can kind of think about people that you go and they've just got it. But how much of that do you think kind of correlates now to today into say social media and I guess like influencer marketing, and stuff like that, and is that something that you see, say, companies using, or is that research that you guys use in any of the work that you do?
Yeah, occasionally we use it. Occasionally we draw upon it. I reckon so the whole concept of cool was for people who were suppressed by society. So they used to have to put on a cool pose. So saying, I may be in chains or persecuted in some way, but you can't touch my soul. And then it was for the outsiders of society, for the people who didn't kind of fit in. So, and now kind of the whole concept of cool has been appropriated by marketers and now kind of sits at the very top of society, if you like if you're cool, lots of cool shit, lots of good shit happens to you. But it's only one way to influence. So you could have somebody who's arguably not cool at all, like somebody like Katy Perry, for example. She's not. I don't think many people go, oh yeah, she's cool, but she's incredibly influential and and incredibly aspirational.
Yep.
And so there's lots of different ways to be influential, other than just being cool. But so.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so it's not necessarily and I guess that comes down to like the definition, right? So there's the definition of cool and understanding it isn't necessarily what.
And it's not just about being it's not just about being popular and so forth. We just wanted to try to understand if that is, and also brands always, we want to be cool, we want to do this, and so do you really want to be cool? Like, we can make you cool, but that's just what you could also be friendly, or you could also be whatever. You know what I mean? So, and it's just it's a fat word, and we just wanted to make sure we could define it. Look, and the other reason I did it was I was in the prison system at the time. And I thought, gee, I want to become a consumer psychologist. What can I do my thesis on that's going to get spoken about? I thought, oh yeah, I'll do it on what makes people cool. That's what everyone wants to know. And so if you are going to spend your time doing a thesis or doing a big piece of research, you do it in a way that's strategically important for you, that gets you where you want to go as well.
I mean, that's a good point just in general for careers and so on as well. But all right, so then from there, we'll continue on because obviously now you're a founder as well. So I'd love to dive into that and kind of take the journey from where we just left off.
Yeah, so prison system, then became a cool hunter. So that's basically, this is as the internet was emerging.
Yeah.
Before the appropriation of trends was really easy. So before you could just, Google what's cool or whatever, they used to send people like myself around the world to different cities and have a look at what the kids were wearing and shit like that. It sounds ridiculous to talk about it now, but that's what I did for a while. And then got into advertising, joined an ad agency called Saatchi & Saatchi. Was there for a while. It's the only agency your mum's heard of, is their unofficial tagline.
Yeah.
And then started an agency called Naked in Australia, and then we sold that, and then started a new agency called Thinkerbell about 5 years ago. And and that's going really well.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, I guess like so you entered the becoming a founder. What was, I guess, some of the differences in the early days? Like obviously you were a founder, previously, and then now you've got Thinkerbell. What were some of the kind of key differences from, say, in the early days to becoming a founder now? Obviously with the technology side of things and how things have changed from you as a consumer psychologist, but also as a marketer.
I think it was really easy once you build a bit of a decent reputation, and then you found a business. It's somebody said to me, don't underestimate how fast out of the gates your business will go, and I thought, oh shit, that's an interesting thing to say. And because you've got all the contacts and the decent reputations, founding a business later is significantly easier than when we did it before. So when we started Naked in Australia, we spent a lot of our time creating a lot of stunts and being very provocative and being very antagonistic to the industry and really pushing ourselves apart from the industry. Whereas this time with Thinkerbell, it's much more, we're really clear on our proposition and how our brand comes to life, and we use PR a lot, but we're not as antagonistic, and we're not as, we don't have to work as hard to seek attention.
Yeah, amazing. And so do you think that discrepancy that obviously still exists now for companies, right? So it's not just like something that was obviously time orientated. It's something now that, is more based on, do you have the contacts? Do you have the experience? Do you have the trust in the industry?
Yeah, I think that's forever, isn't it? But when we started Thinkerbell, it's a real, like, we are really proud of how carefully we crafted the brand, the proposition, and how we were going to grow that from day one. We think it's a really good case study in how to build a brand in and of itself. And we think that's really important because that's the business we're in terms of advising our clients. We just wanted to make sure we did all the things right ourselves, and then we could always just say, we know what we're doing. Yeah, we do it.
Yeah, and that probably comes from like, there's obviously the contacts and so on, but also the experience that comes into it of you've been through it so many times, and you would have done it obviously for so many clients previously, but also you've built it yourself. You've also founded a company already yourself, so it's almost like you've got a map and you kind of know what you got to do.
There's also something called the mere exposure effect, and it's the way a lot of advertising works is something called mere exposure effect, which is just being exposed to a stimulus, whatever it is. The more you're exposed to it, then the more you tend to like it. So you tend to like people who you work close by, as opposed to because you just see them all the time. And advertising works the same thing. You just become familiar with brands, and as humans who have a business, if you constantly bump into Adam Ferrier through this or this or this or this or this, then that builds a sense of trust, and you go, oh yeah, okay, so I've seen him on the telly, or heard of him doing this or this or whatever. That person must be okay, and it's just how it works.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I haven't heard of that principle, but now that you say it, it kind of makes sense. I think I guess that's why I like podcasting as well. I think it's kind of a great way to build trust with someone when they just kind of get that exposure to you often and kind of regularly.
Yeah, that's right. And so one of the things we suggest to our clients is just build fame. So get known as much as you possibly can to as many people as you can, and do everything you possibly can. The other thing is you need really strong brand codes. So be consistent and distinctive in how you look. So if you're selling something, that's pretty obvious. But if you're thinking about yourself as well, is how do you turn up all the time? Do you turn up consistently? Do you act in a way that people expect you to act? This is going to sound really contrived, but for me, it's always, as an individual, it's always black t-shirt. It's always dishevelled, shaggy hair. It always sounds like I'm a bit drunk. It's always the same kind of thing over and over and over again. And that's just, again, like, brands have a sense of consistency about them. And then the other thing is just having a strong proposition or a strong sense of meaning.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You looked at me funny when we were kind of putting these big bad boys on, and um,
But you wear this 24/7, don't you? Like this is your look. You wear it. You sleep with it. You go to the shops with it.
no, but
No.
every podcast, right? So as an example, we've got some of the state-of-the-art mics over there that we could use and we use for other clients, but and the brown couches, like
Yeah.
we're an agency now, but we would never like these aren't for loan, right? In a sense, so the brown couches, the headset, and the snippets we put out with emotional music behind them, it's very distinctive to us, and
Great.
so but it makes sense. Like again, I don't know that principle, but for me, it was like, oh, I don't know if we should change this now because people know it's us when they see this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
So
fantastic,
that
man.
makes sense. I think
Yep,
it's
totally
cool.
good. So, so you've got your fame right because you're reaching everyone. You got your distinctive assets, which is the big crazy headphones and the brown couch. And what's the meaning? What do you stand for? What's the positioning?
Yeah, so I guess the positioning for us is we think conversations are life changing, and so we focus on that. So we focus on creating life changing conversations, and then um, more importantly, how do we make those more accessible to people around the world? So emotion, like not kind of shying away from that, not necessarily being too informative.
Unreal, beautiful.
Yeah,
And
but
the brown. I get the brown couch now as well because it's kind of comfortable, laid back. That is that right? Is that what you're trying to?
yeah, 100%. So I mean, to be honest, like I'm not going to take it. Like, that's not something we did from the start. I think my partner chose these and found them on the internet. But it's more something we figured out probably later on, and we were like, okay, when our snippets started to take off, we were kind of like, let's just try to keep this quite distinct to us.
Good.
But it makes sense. I'm really, I like, I'm genuinely excited for this because I think one of the things I love having conversations, or the conversation, is the depth that, and you can go to depth, which I'm really excited to do. My one goal is to just unpack your mind today. So I'd love to we've obviously talked a little bit about like brand codes and some of that, but I'd love to, I guess, for you to tell us what marketing is, or more importantly, what brand is, to you, and how you think about it, and maybe unpack some of your philosophies.
When I say brand, I think it's everything that everything applied to everything. So, and I think a strong brand can, you know, save the world or fuck it or sell toothpaste or drive a business bankrupt. So, Me Too movement is a beautifully strong organic brand that had really kind of good, strong, distinctive assets, clear brand meaning, and has affected change like I've never seen socially as well. Black Lives Matter, again, it's the same kind of thing. You get a really kind of good handle, good hashtag. You have strong meaning behind it, and it can start to move mountains. Um, but take it right to the other end of the spectrum. You have something like, and I don't mean to belittle those movements, which are amazing and brilliant, but you got something like Colgate, really clear proposition, healthy teeth and mouth and all that kind of stuff, strong distinctive brand assets. You go into a supermarket and it's all shelf blocked and you see all this kind of sea of red, and they've got 90% market share or something. So a strong brand or a brand is kind of the whole being, and then a strong brand is made up of, as I said before, kind of clear brand meaning, clear brand codes, and being as famous as possible.
And so how do you, like if you're a new brand or a new company entering a market, like how do you start to achieve those things? What are kind of some of the first steps that you take, or some of the things that...
I do like talking about my business, but not to self-promote it, just to talk. It's just an easy one to
Let's case study it,
talk through the
100%.
process. So, clinical psychologist, marketing sciences type person in myself meets two creatives. So it's marketing sciences meets hardcore creativity is the proposition, true to the brand. We need some really cool language to sum that up, so we call it measured magic. So measured magic is our proposition, that's what we offer. Then think, right, okay, we're all about measured magic. What's a name that reflects measured magic? And we thought, we're going to call it Sherlock and Merlin at one stage, but we decided to call it Thinkerbell. So, and then we had a little logo, which is Rodin's the Thinker with Tinkerbell's wings on it. Then we thought of having a design aesthetic, which is complementary contradictions. So we put pink and green together, and then and then that's a really strong, distinctive colorways. And then we employ thinkers and tinkers, and that's it. And then thinkers do a certain thing, tinkers do a certain thing. Start each week with measured Mondays, end it with magic hour on a Friday, and so the whole thing is branded. And then I haven't even spoken about the services that we offer within that, but it's all, and it's all born out of a truth that we can then replicate right through the business. And so if I was an individual, I'll try to do that. I'll try to find out a truth about the brand and give it a really cool, interesting brand meaning, and give that really sexy, cool nomenclature. So conversations that change.
Yeah, life-changing conversations.
Life-changing.
Our belief is conversations are life-changing. So
Yeah, life-changing conversations. That's perfect. Then distinctive assets are all the ways that comes to life. Like, yeah, and then the third part of a picture is be as famous as possible. So make sure everything the brand's doing is remarkable. So if you're employing a person, do your employment ad in a way that fucking is, gets loads of attention. Or if you're choosing a new office, make sure that office is talkable in some way. Or if, and just try to find things that are really, really talkable and remarkable, and then give those a push in PR or whatever.
Yeah, wow. So there's a lot there. I think one of the interesting things, and honestly, do you know Scott Galloway? You would know him.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I have invested in a lot of his courses in Section 4, and his brand strategy one was one that I did that completely just probably educated me. I'm not a marketer. I don't come from that world, but or any type of formal education in that arena, but the idea that brand is not necessarily just what people see on social media. It's everything you're talking about, and internally as well. So the different you guys brand as personality and a lot of those kind of different ideas. And one of the things you kind of mentioned there was just that it's not just what the customer sees. It's or the customer will see it in a way, but it's everything. Like
I love it. I love the way you just corrected yourself there, because one of the things you say is everything communicates, and anything that happens internally will reflect externally in the brand. So another saying we have is BX before EX before CX, which is brand experience before employee experience before customer experience. So get the central brand right. Make sure everybody who works on that brand understands that, and then worry about the consumer last of all, and then worry about that. And then whether it's digital channels or who gives a fuck if it's TikTok or
yeah, exactly.
Twitter.
Yeah. Because they're the and I think Mark was kind of talking about this when I interviewed him, and he's like, that's the tip of the spear. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the last thing, and a lot of people start there. A lot of people can start in that. And honestly, I think when you don't have that education and you don't kind of have that
you start with what you know, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a 14-year-old growing up with social media, and then you become 19, 20, 21, whatever, and you think, I want to get into marketing, I want to build a business, and you know social media really well, then you think, fuck, social media is how you build a business. And you're totally starting with the pointy spear, and you're forgetting the whole bloody stick and everything. And it's almost funny, but having said that, there's lots of people building a really successful business around a knowledge of social media. So, good luck to them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the social media is obviously such a new thing if you look at the grand scheme of business as a whole. So I think it's interesting. I still think, part of me also thinks that the same principles really do apply, though. Like it's just people don't know they're doing them in a sense, right? Like, you start with social media, and someone like yourself with a lot of experience would kind of come in and do everything internally and make sure that that's correct, and all these different touch points that we have are representing a greater concept. But I feel like, and mate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like social media, people might be doing that anyway. Like you said it before, like the way you show up. So as an example, you might have, say, the 22-year-old or the 23-year-old is building a great following, and they're showing up in the same way every day, and they're probably maybe leveraging some of those principles without actually knowing it. And
I think so. Like, two things to say on that. As a psychologist, so I used to work in a clinical setting, and somebody once said to me, psychologists just unpack what people instinctively, and unpack and label what people instinctively already know. And I thought that was really kind of interesting, because even just the process of unpacking it and relabeling it can give the patient comfort or help them process what they're feeling just by giving it labels and identifying it and saying, this is how this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. Then the patient gets more strength in working towards whatever goal they're working towards, because they're just understanding how it all works a little bit more. And I think the same thing applies into what you've just said, that somebody's like, so Richard Branson, I don't think ever did a marketing course in his life, but he's quite a good marketer and quite good at building brands, as is the other chap from Apple. Sorry, Steve Jobs, but he passed away. Anyway, so there's lots of people who instinctively get it and understand it, but I still think for them to understand how it's all working is really important.
yeah, of course.
However, I look at someone like Mr. Beast and I think, oh my fucking God, the last thing you ever should do is go to a marketing course or listen to a marketing expert. So if you have a look at his first ever video, it's a weird little video about somebody who killed him in Call of Duty, and the whole thing is his emotive kind of response of what a dickhead this person was who killed him on the highest level or whatever. But then that video got about 20,000 views or something, but then he got on to the whole idea of giving away money in all of his videos and giving away money in different ways. And you just saw his popularity just go nuts over that period. And that was his consistent thing. But now he's kind of doing all sorts of different really interesting big scale content things, which some don't have anything really to do with money at all, but he's now just morphed into, I don't know, his brand's morphing into something else. I don't know why. Mr. Beast is amazing.
Guys, if you're loving this episode, make sure to take a screenshot, give us a tag, or even take a photo if you're watching it. Give us a tag, help spread the love. It helps us out dramatically. Guys, I just want to say a massive shout out to our major sponsors, BizCover. We are getting some amazing guests on right now. We're traveling. We want to continue to travel, and we want to continue to grow the podcast. And the reality is we can't do that without sponsors powering the podcast. And right now we have BizCover on. They're an amazing company, and they're powering the podcast, so we want to support them. But more importantly, business insurance. It's something that I had no idea I had to have in the early days. And I'm very lucky that I had someone tell me, you actually need to go get insured, because things like professional indemnity insurance and public liability insurance, you just never know when you're going to need those. And more importantly, it's really costly if something goes wrong, or if you get sued or something of that nature and you don't have insurance. And that's what it protects you from. And you never know, one day it could save your business from going under, or putting your business back in a time where you are growing and you are making an impact. So BizCover, the link is in the show notes. They will, the great thing about it is there's no paperwork involved, and you can get insured in less than 10 minutes. So the link is in the show notes, BizCover. Go check them out. Get yourself a good deal. This is, I guess, more of a personal question for me, but like, how do you see the relationship, or between content and commerce now? And so these two worlds are colliding in a sense. And Mr. Beast is an example of that. Like I think his burger restaurant was like the most successful burger launch in history, which is
Incredible.
crazy. Kim Kardashian just got a $3 billion valuation on, Skims, and they've been doing content for years. Like, how are you seeing that playing out, and how does that relate to, say, brand, and how, like, what is the relationship there, and where do you think it's heading? That's a big question, I know.
It's a really big question, and it's not one that I've never even framed my head to think about the relationship between those two things, which maybe is just the generational difference of how we're seeing the world. And what I was going to say originally was, all brands are content. So all brands are kind of intellectual property, if you like, that then, so even the can of soup on the supermarket shelf is content, that's engaging my attention for a little bit. I'm having a look, I'm reading the label, that's kind of it. And then it's up to brands to be in your face as much as possible. So that's how advertising works, right? But mental availability, and I'm sure Mark Ritson would have spoken a little bit about that. So the more the brand's in your face, the more you're familiar with it, the more you're likely to choose it in a circumstance when you want that particular brand. And I think that's the role that content plays, right? So the more times you're engaged with that brand, the more times you're likely to buy that brand in a buying situation. But I haven't thought about it more than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've just been thinking about it in my head, obviously we're in the content space, but thinking about how it relates to commerce. I don't know if you've seen, but TikTok's this interesting beast that I just think we don't know anything about yet. But like in China, it's used in a very different way.
Yeah.
Like it's
an e-com channel.
It's an e-com channel, and they started I don't know if you've seen, but they started buying up warehousing. So
Yeah, it's amazing.
it's just,
every content creator becomes a little shop, and it's all a seamless little thing from the content to buying the stuff in the video, and it's all seamless, and crazy.
yeah,
And amazing.
it's such an interesting space for me. Like I'm just like, oh, because like in China, I don't know, like it's infomercials, like basically,
Yeah.
like it's like
That's right.
it's pretty interesting. I don't know if the rest of the world would go that path, but I just think, okay, well, how does that play out in America potentially, or how does that play out here? And
I mean, I think what's fascinating about that is if you look at behaviour change, and that's the other kind of business that we're in. Well, that's the business we're all in, is changing people's behaviours. How we'll say it. Like, it's too. You have to have a motivation to do something. It has to be easy to do. And so if you can make anything, and so much of a big kind of innovations in commerce is just about ease. So if you see an influencer holding a dress, or you just see an influencer wearing a dress in a TikTok video, and now you can just press the dress and get it sent to you directly from that video, the motivation is already there. So they're just making it completely seamless. So I can't see how that principle is not going to become a global principle in the future. Like, it will just be able to be, tap and buy off, or or whatever it's called, off any piece of content will be where things are heading, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I think, yeah. I mean, have you ever watched any of the videos of like the infomercials and how it's done in China? It's quite it's
It's in your face,
yeah.
and obvious, and I think there's a different thing going on with Western cultures and Eastern cultures, where Australia is kind of, we pride ourselves on being slightly cynical or being slightly adverse to being sold to really, really directly, and I don't, in lots of Asian cultures, I don't think you see that as much. I think they see the tolerance of being sold to is fine. That's okay. But it's a little bit different. Our relationship with brands and being sold to is a bit different here.
Yeah, definitely. I think it might be a little bit more subtle,
Yeah.
when it comes across, but it's really interesting what's happening in that space. The other thing, I mean, you just said it then, and I think this is obviously where your wheelhouse is behavior change. And I guess I'd love to know how you think of that in relation to a brand, or in relation to marketing, and even more, in how does it kind of relate to content as well? And so if there's someone who's listening who has a brand right now, how should they be thinking about behavior change? Because I know that like a lot of small businesses who don't say have the I guess the formal knowledge of either being in psychology or even in marketing, they just kind of go, yeah, we need to create content, or we need to kind of get our brand in front of people, or we need to do PR, or we need to do this, and they kind of look at the mechanism, but they're not really thinking deeply about what you're talking about, which is how do I change this person's mind, or implement my brand in their mind. So
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a really big question, but just as a broad brushstroke principle, most people, my generation, who started to learn about marketing, you had a brand or something, and then you had to push that message onto people as much as possible. In most industries, sort of around behaviour change, they kind of realise that just pushing a message on someone isn't the best way to change their behaviour. It does work, advertising works, but it's not necessarily most effective. And what's more effective, getting people involved in whatever you want them to do, so getting them to participate in something. And so we have a saying that action changes attitude far quicker than attitude changes action. So if you can get somebody to interact with your message, stop and process it, pass it on to someone else, or respond to it, or fill in a form, or give their opinion, or whatever. As soon as you get somebody to interact with something, as opposed to passively just digest it, then they have to justify it to themselves that that brand or that entity was worth interacting with. And then, and that's a process called cognitive dissonance. So I've just acted. I now have to justify my time to myself. So therefore I think more positively about the brand. So I would in a completely interactive marketing communications landscape now, where everything is interactive, back to your kind of e-com TikTok example, but here, you can you can stop, play, pass on, have an opinion on with all social media now. I would be focusing as much as I possibly can on how do I get somebody to interact with me. And a really bad example is, those people who dress up as koalas on the street and say, hey, how are you? And then you interact with them and they say, oh, can I have a buck? They're constantly thinking of what's the first question I can ask this person that will get them to stop and interact with me. Is it, hey, nice dress? Or is it, hey, isn't the weather good? Or, hey, you look, whatever it is. And so I'd be thinking, so I think like one of those koala celebrity those chuggers, but I would be thinking, how do I get this person to stop and interact with me? Not how do I entertain this person?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of, when you said that, I think about cold calling.
Even just think about it, this basic message. Let's say you're writing an EDM and you want to do a promotion, or you want to ask someone an opinion. If I said to you, look, I'm interested in you using Thinkerbell services, or option A, hey, here's Thinkerbell, we're really good at this, or hey, we're Thinkerbell, we need a bit of help working out what to sell, or working out what to do. Most people will lean forward to the one where you're asking for help rather than the promotional message, because it allows you in, and allows you to feel smart, allows you to give your opinion. So constantly try to get people to act. And the other big trick I learned in marketing many years ago is always asking people for a favour is the easiest way to get somebody to like you. So if you can get somebody to do something for you, they'll like you more for having done that favour.
Mm.
I'll like you more for having come down to this studio in Richmond and hanging out with you than taking an hour out of my time, because I now just have to justify that to myself, that you're worthy of having done that for.
Yeah, it's so, and it's, I guess, like, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I'm probably more sales orientated than I am marketing or anything like that. But like, when you said it before, like when you're doing a cold call, like one of the first things you do is you can't sound like a salesman. So it's like, like this person may not know you, and you'll be like, oh, hey, Adam, it's Kyle. And they'll be like, Kyle? Do I know a Kyle? And then all of a sudden, that's that first interaction. And then the next part is you need to get them to do this favor for you. So like, that's the way I think about sales, is like, get them to question rather than make an assumption. And then the next part is get them to do a favor for me. So, hey, do you have like 10 minutes that blah, 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 and I just want to talk to you about this, right? And so they feel like, yeah, okay, I'll give you 10 minutes. But the first part of that is that disruption.
Wow.
It's so interesting, that when you said that.
And so you do that. So that's your...
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, right.
That's how we're getting in with corporates. That's literally it. I'm like getting a number, and I'm just like, hey, it's Kyle. And they're like, who the fuck's Kyle? And I'm like, and they don't know me, but
did you read that, or
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been doing my research into it. I used to do cold calling years and years ago when in my first business as a consultant. But so I learned the principle back then.
So what was it? Disrupt. Hey, it's Carl.
You just need to dress up their thought pattern.
Then what was the second one before a favour?
No, that was it. So the next one is you disrupt them.
Yeah.
So you need to disrupt their thinking, because it's a random number. So when you get a random number, if someone's gonna answer it, most people will try to sell you then and there, right? So they're like, hey, it's so and so from this company, blah blah blah, and you can't do that, because then straight away they're like, fuck this, like I'm done. So the first thing is like, hey, it's Kyle, and they're like, Kyle? Do I know a Kyle? Which Kyle is it? Blah blah blah, and already you just disrupt their thought pattern. And then the next part is how can you get that person to to do you a favor,
Yeah,
because
right.
then that's when that you, like you just said, then it's the same principle. They will, yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm doing that like fucking 3 hours of my day every day at the moment. So it's painful, but it's like, and you do get a couple of fuck yous, but like that's just part of it. I just lost where we were at, but
That's
yeah,
good.
it's
That's good,
interesting.
mate.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of crossover, and I think that's why I like the psychology part of it as well. But I think what a lot of those principles you're just talking about can maybe change the way people are thinking about it.
Yeah,
Instead of
maybe,
just getting in front of everyone.
maybe.
Um, I guess so. We've obviously talked about some like core principles, right? And so there's a lot of value in that. But I guess like one of the questions I would have for you is, and especially with the agency you own and the great work that you're doing, is like, what is the process then, right? So that you kind of think of, your process in your mind that you take someone through to get to these principles, in a sense, right? Because you're probably having companies come to you that don't know this stuff, or they're not aware of it, and so you would have to kind of take these people through a process.
Yeah, most of our clients are, they're big, established
Brands, yeah,
brands. So it's
they
you
would
know,
have
yeah,
something to.
and they know it, and they've got, so I'm dealing with a CMO or a chief marketing officer who's been doing this stuff for eons and so on. But our overall at Thinkerbell, we have a process which is called our four-leaf clover, which is we start off with the brand meaning at the bottom of the clover. So in that is kind of what does the brand stand for, and to work that out, you look at the business vision, segmentation, positioning, any brand architecture issues, and then once you got all that sorted, then you look at the brand expression, like how am I going to express that to the whole world? What's the big central platform idea? What's the brand codes? What's the overall communications framework? And then once we've got those two things in place, then we look at how to change behaviour. Once you change behaviour, then we look at how to build habits, how to keep people doing that behaviour over and over and over again. And so they're the kind of the four quadrants.
Really, that seems like that's the psychologist side of it, isn't it? Like the behavior change model.
Yeah, it's brand first, get your brand right, and then use your brand to change behaviour.
Really, really interesting. Would you be able to, I guess, dive into each of those elements and just kind of, I guess, give, I guess, some of the key lessons out of those? Like that doesn't have to be long, but just what are some of the key kind of questions that people can ask of themselves in each of those?
The brand meaning bit's most important at the bottom. So what does the brand stand for? Getting really, really tight on that. And one kind of cheap trick way to do it is take two concepts that don't necessarily fit together and find some tension between those two things and make that thing. So again, conversations, I can't really remember the fucking...
Pivotal, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but conversations
Yeah.
that can change the world.
Yeah,
Life-changing conversations.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So that's good. Conversation is cheap, easy, quick, superficial, whatever. But put that with life-changing, and suddenly it's a promise of, oh, fuck, that's interesting. Just a conversation can be life-changing. And so again, and Measured Magics kind of works the same way. My personal brand positioning, which we love giving everyone in the agency a brand positioning, just as a bit of a joke, but mine's in enigmatic irritation. So I'm kind of interesting, but then I get quite irritating as well. So it's kind of got this push-pull effect on people.
Yeah.
And then once you've got that right, the brand expression bit's really important. Probably the most important thing are your brand codes, your brand distinctive assets, which is all the little bits of the brand. So with Coca-Cola, it's the contour bottle, it's the ribbon, it's the red, it's the sans serif font. It's all those little things, right? So if you're doing content, it's what's the consistent bits over and over again. What's the start? What's the finish? What's the theme? What's the distinctive look? All of that kind of your big fucking headphones. And then on the behaviour change stuff, it's working out the behaviour to change, and we map that against motivation and ease, as I mentioned before. So are you looking at a motivation issue? You're trying to build people's motivation? Really hard to do. Or are you trying to make it easier for them to do what you want them to do? Much, much simpler to do. And then on the habit side of thing, we're looking at how to get people to invest their time and energy into our brand, which further binds them into a relationship with the organisation or entity.
Yeah. Okay. So those last two, I'll be honest. I think that's kind of. I think the first two I really understand, and I think it's something that I'm comfortable with. But then those last two is probably where my, I guess, understanding drops off a little bit. But would you be able to just give some examples of, say, or like little case studies for those last two, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Something we did years ago with the Red Cross blood service, we had a couple of data points. Do you give blood?
No.
No. And have a guess what percentage of the population gives blood?
5?
Yeah, 3. So
Yeah.
3%.
I was going to say 3. That's fucking weird. But I was like, oh, I don't want to sound like it. I don't want it to be too
pessimistic.
Yeah.
That's right. Those evil humans. So 3% give blood. 95% of people think it's a pretty good idea giving blood. So everyone's got the motivation to do it. Only 3% of people do it, and the reasons why they don't do it is because it's too hard or whatever. Before we came along, their tagline was "Roll up your sleeves," and which kind of communicated that it's going to be hard work, that you're going to get a needle shoved in your arm, that you had to do your bit. It was really full on. Nothing we could do to change the actual how easy it was. So we cognitively wanted to make it feel as easy as possible, and so we focused and did a whole big ad campaign around, if you give blood, you get a biscuit, and the fact that you get a biscuit, it's going to be a really yummy biscuit because you've just given blood and you're going to deserve it. But if all you're getting is a biscuit, then it must be a small act, and try to make the act seem as small and everyday as possible by getting a biscuit. So that was a really nice example of realising the behaviour change required was not to increase motivation. Motivation's already there. It was to make it feel as easy as possible to do what we wanted people to do. And that at the time was the most successful campaign the blood service had ever run in Australia, and it also had a really nice sociability angle to it. So that would be a good example of that. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think, for me, that's like the tip of the spear versus the core, like what we were kind of talking about. Like that's
That's the core, isn't it? Not the tip. Or is that the tip?
No, that's what I'm saying. So that's the core. That's what you just said there is the core.
That's right. And then that did come to life in there was a whole lot of social media associated with that. But
the behavior change element is the core principle of what you kind of did, which I find is like that's true marketing, in my opinion, when I think about marketing now, it's not the social media side, it's what you just talked about there, the way you guys thought about that, and obviously the principle you used is really, really interesting in my opinion, and I think is where, I find like a lot of small businesses probably don't do that, if that makes sense, So I find that
there's a lot of things to worry about, isn't there, with the small businesses. It's hard to get the cleanliness to focus on something and go, right, what?
Yeah, because you're doing a million bazillion different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so a case study on the habit formation side, if you've got one. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's I think somebody who I admire really, really well in this space is Qantas, the Qantas frequent flyer program, and I admire how often they're asking for my opinion as a frequent flyer, and occasionally I find myself filling out these surveys, and I've got no idea why I'm filling out these surveys, but I think it's just because they're constantly asking for my opinion on stuff, that I therefore feel like they really want to know what Adam Ferrier thinks of their bloody frequent flyer program. And so I've got no idea what happens to this data if they're using it or not. I don't think I've ever won the bottle of Grange or whatever it is that they've offered me. But it's that kind of principle where they're constantly trying to involve me and make me feel involved in the program.
Yeah, interesting. I think is that the most difficult part of the 4? Do you think, or is it because obviously the most important might be the beginning, but
I think it's maybe the least important because. So have you read How Brands Grow or have Byron Sharp on
Byron
the?
Sharp. No, so
Yeah,
we reached out to him, but
yeah.
there was some difficulties with the university.
Ah,
Yep. But
yeah,
I've read his
yeah,
book, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's interesting. Like I bought that book in like I was going through my Scott Galloway phase and did his course and then just started fucking buying every brand book there is on the earth. But read it and
What did you think of my book?
haven't read it.
Ah, I thought you said you bought every brown book.
To be honest, I only read half of Byron's, so but I think like it's interesting, like because I started to read it and I got halfway through and then realized that like I wasn't going to use this as much in my business, so it was kind of I fell out of it. But
The way I kind of look at it is there's so many things to get right. You got to get your brand proposition right. You got to get how your whole brand messaging right. Then you got to acquire customers. It's almost like, and then once you've got all of this, then you got to look after them. And it's almost like that becomes as an agency providing services, there always seems to be other things to be done, or often seems to be other things to be done before you start looking after the current customers you've got. But it's not to say they're not being looked after. They probably are. It's probably going okay. It's the other things which are often more in your face.
yeah, so what were you going to say on Byron's book?
He just talks about the best way for brands to grow is to acquire as many users as possible. So constantly target light users of the category or users of the category. And he talks about loyalty programs being very much overrated. And if you've got a loyalty program in any kind of way, you're probably selling to people who are already going to buy you, or you're discounting to people who already
Would have purchased anyway.
So he's a little bit skeptical on that
Yeah.
side of things.
Interesting. Makes sense. Definitely makes sense. Like it's almost like a brand is a byproduct of acquisition.
Yeah,
in
that's
a sense. Right. I want to kind of go to the founder side now. So you've obviously been a founder. We've kind of tapped into your marketing and psychology brain, but as a founder, what would you say some of the biggest lessons for you have been along the journey? Because being a founder, obviously you've got your skill set, but being a founder is almost another skill set in itself, and managing people and so on. So like, what would you say your biggest lessons as a founder are?
So John Fitzgerald was a tennis player for Australia, and he got to average success. But he won the Australian Open doubles once, and he partnered with Boris Becker, and Boris Becker was number one in the world at the time when he won it. And I still remember his speech, and his speech was, all he said was, rule number one, choose a good partner. And
Yeah,
I
okay.
thought, oh shit, that's good. And so as a founder, identifying and being honest with yourself about what you're good at, what you're not good at, and then looking for a partner or partners and making sure that you're plugging gaps with those people and that you're going to work well with those people, I think is probably the most important thing for me. So I couldn't organise my way out of a paper bag. So I need very organised people around me to help a business flourish.
Yeah.
Then the other thing I reckon is really interesting is I just could not, as a kid, I could not ever think I could be happy working in a job. And then when I was working at Corrective Services, I had to go see the psychologist of Corrective Services because they kept saying to me, I'm disrupting all the other people around me and I can't fit into a multidisciplinary team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too whatever they thought I was.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of trouble fitting into any kind of corporate structure.
Yeah.
And so being a founder means you can create the culture that allows you to fit in.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And so I find that probably the most liberating, wonderful thing for me, that I can spend years in these organisations at Naked and now Thinkerbell and really enjoy it and really feel like I fit in because I've helped create
Culture that suits.
a culture that suits, and hopefully there's enough room in that culture for other people to feel like they fit in as well. But if you have trouble fitting in, as an individual, and you have trouble finding your space in the world, then creating your own space is really, if you're lucky enough to be able to find yourself in that position, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I think I know that that's definitely, I mean, I'm in my second business now, and I know that that's something now we're definitely doing a little bit more, and I'm probably more aware of because I was a little bit younger early on and didn't, I mean, still don't really know what I'm doing, but I would say that early on I really struggled with that, is kind of understanding how I fitted into kind of the business. So I think that's really good advice it's not the usual piece of advice either, if that makes sense. Like, it hasn't been said many times.
And I think it's because it's almost born from weakness or from lack of alternatives. It's not born from...
It's not aspirational.
No, it's not born from ambition, is it? It's
Yeah.
born from, oh, fuck, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I don't fit in anywhere else.
Yeah.
Just on the other thing as well, which I reckon is really cool, is once you've started something, then it allows you're in your control of your own destiny. So then you can meet somebody else. And so now we've started another business with a woman called Ebony. And Ebony was our client. She was at the Red Cross. And we just loved working with her and did this whole stuff around loneliness and how to beat loneliness and all this kind of stuff. We just loved working with each other. We decided to create our own kind of social cause business called DOA, which stands for Decade of Action, but it also means kind of dead on arrival, which is a head nod to the fact that there's no business model on a dead planet. And so that has allowed us to be kind of opportunistic, if you like, because we can then do that and then do that. And so you don't have to be constrained either. You know what I mean? You don't have to... Other opportunities avail themselves all the time.
That's an interesting point, because I think that's also not... like there's the notion that like all in on one thing.
Yeah, the whole Facebook thing, or now Meta, and you look at people like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk. They don't really kind of, not that we're in the same league or whatever. But I love, and again, that whole thing about not fitting in is kind of where it came from, right? So I don't fit in. I need to create my own little thing to help me cope with the world. But then I'm also interested in lots of things. So you can start to light fires and then see what fires work, what fires don't, and so forth. And we've had a few failed attempts at creating other little entities along the way as well. But
it's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's okay.
It's interesting. I really like it because I think I might be the same way in a sense, like with the idea of like not honing and just being here. Like I don't know why, but I just don't know if it suits me. But I think it's interesting advice because you can get caught up in the other one, which is no, you've got to be all in on this one thing and that's it. And you're right, meta, right? Like it's
someone once said to me that. Maybe I said it to someone else. Time's like a piano accordion. Like it kind of can just ebb and flow and stretch. And so I find DOA almost creates more time and more headspace because it's so energizing. It's so interesting to think what DOA is doing over here that it brings energy back into Thinkerbell and so on. So
that's a really interesting topic, isn't it? Because it's like on the principle that for me it's like the last thing I would ever want to do with my time is spend it, on maybe a construction site knocking nails in or some shit like that, right? But the idea is, time spent there would go very slow, and then, in my current job, time feels like there's never enough, and it's quick.
So how cool would it be to work on a construction site? Is what you're saying, right? Because then
I was on one yesterday. That's why it came to my mind.
Yeah, but then you're forcing time to slow down, and then with that, you would get so much energy to bring back to whatever you're doing.
Yeah, so I was on a construction site for 8 hours yesterday, and it was just like, fuck me. But it was good because it changed my perception, right, which is what you're talking about.
Wonderful, great.
Yeah, beautiful. But I love that principle because I experienced it yesterday, but I love it because it's not the norm. It's not what people would normally say. It kind of moves away from that hard work culture, which I think is important. All right, so last segment is quick fire. I always have to preface this. It's not quick fire. It's more like slow fire. Like you don't have to change your answers or anything like that, but they're just a set of questions we ask everybody, which is a bit weird. But so the first question is, what's one piece of advice for your younger self?
Try a little bit harder to fit in. So I think fitting in is an underrated skill. So I would advise people to not find their passion or find their thing. That'll come, but I do think there's huge value, and life's a bit easier if you can just try a bit harder to fit in and be more like everyone else.
Yeah, is it about fitting in with everybody else, or is it about fitting in with, say, the maybe you being the missing piece to that puzzle in a sense? So like finding your people.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's probably a.
That's a question more. It's interesting because like I don't know.
Yeah, I quite like that. Find it because then you don't have to change. It's about finding. Yeah, invest in finding your people. Maybe is a nice way to put it.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think because I think you're right in that skill is really really important. But I think also not you want to fit into a place where you don't necessarily have to change everything about yourself. But then, I don't know.
But then everyone, and again on social media, there's this expectation that there's a whole lot of people just like me, and I don't have to do anything. They should just come to me. Whereas back in the day, you'd be forced to hang out with people in the real world and have to get along with certain people. And there's good skills to be learned in that. So maybe it is a little bit of, no, fuck you. I want you to fucking fit in with this bunch of people here and work out how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great skill to learn, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so the next question is, what's one piece of advice you would give someone who's just starting in business?
Try not to fail. So I hate this whole fail fast thing. I think try to win, try to do something you're going to be good at, because I think I do like that whole idea of success breeds success. And I think early wins kind of build on themselves and it builds its own momentum. So I would say don't believe in the fail stuff. Make sure you succeed early.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's I mean, the wording. I think the interesting thing about what you just said is I 100% agree with the success. It's interesting in business where you get these small wins and then they spark this kind of explosion of ideas, and then you kind of can build on top of it and follow the patterns.
Yeah.
And then I mean, the other side of it is like there's also a lot of ideas of those that don't necessarily work as well.
Yeah, that's right. And then but I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't want to be negative, and that's why I think just invest the time to make sure whatever it is you're going to do, you're going to have a bit of success with it, because then that'll happen. Don't go, oh, give us a go. If it doesn't work, it's okay, because if it doesn't work, it just dampens your ability for it to work the next time a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the psychological element, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the believing the story you tell yourself type of thing. Like, yeah, I'm either failing a lot or I'm winning a lot. But and it's probably the same thing, just prefaced differently.
Damien Hardwick, when he took over Richmond Football Club, I remember a quote from him years ago. He said, every single goal we kick, we celebrate like we're fanatics. We celebrate like we're winning the whole game. We celebrate like we've won the game. And he said, because if we start to celebrate like we're winning and start to demonstrate winning actions and behaviours, we'll become a winning team. And I love that. And it's the same kind of thing. So he found the little successes and he built on those over and over.
I'm a Richmond supporter, so like I invested heavily into that kind of journey. And
well, I saw him quoted as that, and then I ran into him at the grand final this year, and I asked him about that. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly right, yeah. And we had a really kind of passionate conversation about that.
So as a Richmond supporter, you knew Richmond were on when the backmen were celebrating the goal at like round 12. of the season.
Yeah,
You know, you go, okay, we're in for a good season because fucking Dylan Grimes is sitting there, and they turn around to each other and fucking they're all going off the backman about a goal, or you know.
Great,
So
beautiful.
it kind of talks to what you're saying. The last question is, what's the most important trait that a founder must have for success, and why?
That's interesting. 'Cause I'd have to say it as a founder team, because this is a trait that I don't have in spades, but I do think probably the most important thing is the team and looking inward and empathy. And I was going to say empathy, but it's not empathy towards the consumer or the customer. It's empathy towards the people you work with. So that's the most important thing to get right, I think. And maybe I'm in a service-based business where people, yeah. So, and then my business partner has that in spades, and I think that is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's interesting because my partner has that in spades, and she works in the company, and so she's amazing at that. And I look at her and I go, "Fuck, how do you do that?" You know what I mean? Like it's something that I'm trying to work on personally as well.
That's great. You'll never have it.
Never. Yeah, it's true, but I mean, it talks to your point of being able to find. You said it before, being able to find the right partners and the right people that can complement who you are and what you do.
Yeah, exactly, and that's good. And just being aware and play to your strengths and so on.
Beautiful. Mate, I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. Your mind is brilliant, I must say. Like, I found myself really engaging and wanting to learn, which is amazing. I'd love for you to tell everyone where they can find you. Where can they find Thinkerbell? You know, where can they find a little bit about everything that you do?
Thanks for the opportunity to do that. So on Twitter at Adam Ferrier and LinkedIn Adam Ferrier. I write a lot on both of those, but I've written a couple of books: The Advertising Effect, How to Change Behaviour, and Stop Listening to the Customer, Try Hearing Your Brand Instead. So they're published by Oxford and Wiley. The agency is Thinkerbell.com, and there's and decadeofaction.com is the social cause agency, and a few other places, but that'll do shortly.
Yeah. No, amazing. Highly recommend all of that, just based on our conversation today. And also, I do a lot of research.
Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry, because if there was one more bit of self-promotion, there is the podcast. So if listeners of this, so Black T-Shirts, which is a podcast, which is XXL creativity for marketers. So it's all about identifying the creative process. Is basically what that podcast is about. Sorry.
No, I highly recommend anything that you do. And I mean, anyone who listened to this today would understand the depth of your knowledge. And I mean, you know, it was an amazing conversation. So thank you so much.
No problem.
John, thanks for putting this together, my man. And to our listeners, once again, the support you show is just amazing. We don't get to have the amazing guests on that we do unless that support comes through. So we really appreciate you guys. We really hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll see you next week. Yeah, we'll go, man. We're golden. They're about to see it shine, 'cause we'll go.